Welcome to the Healthy CEO Show, brought to you by Authentic Health Partners. This is the show where high performance meets optimal health. Join us as we dive into the world of longevity, wellness, and health span, designed specifically for health-minded leaders like you. Get ready to unlock the secrets to sustained success, vitality, and resilience. This is the Healthy CEO Show. Now here's your host, Jason Wright.
Here's the introduction that I was given as a suggestion, and we'll just take it from there. It says, what if your doctor's advice wasn't the full truth? In Bamboozled, Duped, and Hoodwinked, Dr. Joe Jacko pulls back the curtain on the corruption, half-truths, and hidden agendas shaping modern medicine. With decades of experience on the inside, he reveals why chronic disease treatments often miss the mark, how blue suits in the healthcare industry control your options, and what you can do to protect your health. Dr. Jacko delivers clear, actionable strategies that help people think critically, seek the truth, and take control of their well-being. Doc, the reason I love that intro and why I get it is because what it says to me is that you're helping people find agency in their health, not just from a health and wellness standpoint and understanding how to take better care of themselves, but also in the marketplace, how to figure out how to attack this behemoth that is the American healthcare system. And so with that intro, talk to me about how you got to this place where you were focusing more on regenerative medicine, longevity, and the sort of thing that you've made your life's work.
Sure. Well, in a way, my career's gone more or less full circle. I started off in internal medicine. I did a sports medicine fellowship. I was working with young athletes and golden age athletes who enjoy staying healthy. So I was helping them with their musculoskeletal injuries. And then around 2008, I became interested in men's health primarily, looking at hormone replacement. And then so that was a great learning experience because to me, it kind of added to the sports medicine realm, particularly, especially for the golden age athletes, just a way of staying healthier and more fit longer. And then 2012, I made a decision to go back into general internal medicine. And it was there that I really became awake to what I write about in the book, some of the corruption and the way the medical profession, I think, sometimes misleads not only patients, but also physicians. Our training is very carefully scripted or crafted. And in large part, it's much of the education system is funded either directly or indirectly by the pharmaceutical industry. And we are conditioned that every sign and symptom requires a pharmaceutical solution. I just found that wrong. And at some point, I just got kind of tired of doing that. And about 3 and a half years ago, I left, and I'm in a kind of a concierge practice, and we just focus on health, healthy lifestyle, diet, nutrition, exercise, and a lot of hormone replacement. And some regenerative medicine. I'm not doing as much as I would like, though, in that area.
So one of the things, so I just had, I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Jerry Mixon. He's out in Washington State. He does a lot of hormone replacement therapy, and his deal, he said something that I'd never heard before, in that in his practice, now obviously, testosterone replacement therapy and all sorts of hormone replacement therapy, I'm very familiar with that, talked to a lot of folks about it, a lot of practitioners. But one of the things that he does in his practice I found pretty interesting was he uses in the male species. I think it was male particularly, maybe women as well, but particularly men. He looks at a benchmark of 25 years old as the kind of the peak hormone, and then where we start to drop off. And so he kind of uses that as his benchmark whenever he's evaluating a patient. One of the things that is very controversial, I can't say it's very controversial. It's one of these things that some people are adamantly opposed to testosterone replacement or hormone replacement. Others are really bullish on it. Do you have something that you look at as to like an age group, a kind of an age cohort that you try to target to try to get men to, or how do you go about the
Right.
practice?
Yeah. Good question. We kind of shoot for the early 30s,
Right?
but that was years ago. Now I'm seeing more and more young men in their 20s who are deficient in testosterone.
Yeah.
And so it's happening at an earlier age. So obviously there's things in the environment that I think are contributing to that. But it's not uncommon for us almost every day to have a young male come in with low in testosterone. So, but in terms of replacing it, we try to get them in the upper third of what we call the reference range. But
Mhm.
we don't just focus on the range. We also focus on their symptoms and how they're feeling, because that's more important than the actual lab values. But there are a lot of physicians still very much against it.
Yeah. Let's stick on that for a little bit. So whenever you say people how they feel, I think that's very important. It's one of the things that Jerry said. That's also the one of the things Dr. George Ibrahim out in Asheville, North Carolina, that I've talked to. He said the same thing. It's like I'm more interested in how my patients feel. It's not just about the data. The data is obviously important, and you use it as a guide. But really, it's like how do you feel now, and how can we get you to where you want to be? So, what are some of those symptoms that you find your patients coming in and saying, like, is it lethargy? Is it belly fat? Is it just like what are you seeing? Kind of what is that common driver of people to walk through your door and talk about this?
Yeah, probably the most common one is being fatigued or lethargic, or just a general sense of unwell. They just don't feel like themselves. And so there's sexual symptoms, there's non-sexual symptoms. The sexual symptoms are pretty obvious, low libido, poor erections, and so on. The more subtle ones are the non-sexual symptoms, which can be fatigue, or they're in their 40s and are putting weight on despite their exercise and their diet being stable. Mood swings, irritability, brain fog, lack of confidence. So that's another one. So all those, so it's kind of a constellation of symptoms that we're looking for, and then we kind of verify that with the lab values, but we don't focus on the lab values because most men are going to fall in the reference range. The reference range is so it needs to be redone, but it encompasses 95% of the men.
Yep.
And so we'd like to shoot for the higher range to try to get them up to that range. And there's also evidence that ranges in the upper third are associated with actually less cancer and less heart disease, which kind of contradicts everything the cardiologists want to say.
Yeah. Well, and you say something there too that brings kind of to the point of the medical industrial complex that I find just whenever I started really focusing on precision health in my own, my own well-being. One of the things that really frustrated me is whenever I go for a typical wellness visit at a primary care physician and get a blood panel, it's going to be it's pretty limited. You mentioned it. Everything's going to be benchmarked against general population, general numbers. It's not going to be specific to me. I'm going to get a PDF readout that's the exact same one that was given out about 30 years ago. So there's nothing new there.
Right.
And more to the point of what you're talking about, unless in most cases, at least with my physician, unless I ask for a testosterone panel or my results, I'm not going to get it. I have to specifically go in and ask for that. Is that kind of the universal practice that a lot of family practitioners are doing, or is it a choice? But I don't see that as a normal standard practice to
Right.
give those test levels.
It's universal, although I do see a little bit more general practitioners sometimes ordering it,
Okay.
but they don't want to deal with it. They'll order it because the patient, they don't want to deal with it once if it comes back abnormal.
Unless what I found, and I hate to be cynical, and I'm not knocking all primary care docs. I mean, one of my closest friends in the whole world, mentors in health and wellness, and business partner in this space is Dr. Gus Vickery. He spent 30 years in family practice, but he did these things, these extra things like what you're doing now is kind of just a normal sense of protocol because he wanted to truly be precise on his patient's health. But what I've noticed is a lot of docs, they'll start asking you if you want it, if they're selling if they're selling testosterone replacement, if they're trying to make up in their family practice by doing hormone replacement, kind of becoming novices at it,
Mhm.
which is kind of frustrating. It's like they don't do it unless there's the financial reward attached. And I'm hoping that physicians like you can kind of change that.
Yeah. So when I joined this big general practice in 2012, we had a group of endocrinologists, and
Mm.
I knew they were not in favor of it, a testosterone replacement. So I met with them and I said, I know you guys you don't want to treat these men, so I'm happy to treat them. And the head of the group said, well, he was probably 38 at the time. He goes, well, we just don't believe in feel good medicine. And I thought, well, at some level, everything is feel good medicine. If you get someone out of heart failure, they feel better. If you correct their vision, they see better. And I just thought, well, I think when you're 50, you might change your mind. But
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just been the general feeling for a long time. In medicine, traditional medicine has been aimed at getting you out of a problem. It's not been geared towards optimizing health.
Right. It's sick care. It's not health care.
Yes,
It's sick care.
exactly right.
Yeah, and take the listener through kind of just your thesis of our health system, because one of the things, like I mentioned before we started recording, that I'm trying to tackle from a policy standpoint and a global standpoint myself in my own private life. But like, kind of give the thesis, and I think this goes into bamboozled and duped. Your work or your book. Why is that? What's the genesis of it? You mentioned the pharmaceutical industry.
Mhm.
Most of us, I'm sure, some people think that we're conspiracy theorists, but I've heard all the stories of the Rockefeller Foundation and their
Mhm.
fund of pharmaceuticals and how all
Yep.
of that started. So kind of talk a little bit about the history and how we got here and how physicians like you are trying to fix this system.
Well, the system was really based on something called the Flexner Report in 1910. And and it was kind of something that made sense. It was an attempt to standardize the training of medical students and physicians. And around that time, the big industrialists like the Rockefellers played a big role. And there's a book out there called The Rockefeller Medicine Men. And a lot of drugs are byproducts of the oil or the petroleum industry. And so they found a way to use their byproducts to make even more money. So then over time, there was a point in time where actually the pharmacist used to give you the medicine. The doctor made the diagnosis, the pharmacist decided what to do. And now that's been lost. And then when they started mass producing pills, medication, they used to do the whole, you know, more thing and,
Yeah.
compound it. And they kind of got away from that and they started mass producing the pills. So that was a big change when they were able to start mass producing medication. More recently, though, I think the big uh, uh, thing that has really affected medicine is just physicians being employed by the large hospital systems.
Yeah.
When I first came out, most physicians were either they were self-employed or in group practices that they owned, and now they are controlled by the hospital systems, as well as the insurance companies. When I first came out, you had some autonomy. We don't have any more autonomy. We are kind of told what to do, directly or indirectly, and we're incentivized in ways to accomplish that. Um, I'm not sure I answered your question entirely
Yes,
there.
it's perfect. That's a perfect lead up, because and I'll ask you this. So a lot of people hear about fee for service, and like especially in the conversation surrounding value-based care, where we're starting to look at
Mhm.
outcome-based care, incentives given to physicians for actually keeping people healthy, which is a pretty novel concept, right? But like, talk to the audience whenever they hear that, because they'll hear it and they'll be like, okay, I don't understand. It should be fee for service. I pay a fee for the service I get. What is the difference? And why does fee for service often, to your point, due to insurance companies, hospital pressures, trying to hit a bottom line, trying to keep a population managed? Why is fee for service often a negative as a physician trying to provide true quality care?
Well, you're somewhat hampered by what the insurance company will pay for, number one. So they're going to limit what kind of tests you can provide, and then you only allow so many visits to help the patient as well. So to really for patients to get what they deserve, they're going to have to find a way to go outside the system, and that means they're going to have to be willing to spend some of their own money. And I mean, there's just no two ways about that. If you're going to let you get what you pay for generally. Now, so many patients are just used to using their insurance. They don't want to do anything that their insurance won't pay for. Um, but yeah, there needs to be some incentives, and some of this value-based medicine has some benefit to it. But some of the metrics I think are a little misguided, if you will.
Hmm.
It's really designed. The metrics are such that you have no choice to meet the metric. You have to put the patient on a medication.
Mm.
And there's just not enough time being spent on just having to meet with a dietitian or an exercise physiologist. Like our practice right here, so I'm in one of our exam rooms, but we have a dietitian down the hall. We have a gym, a 12,000 square foot gym right 100 feet from me. And so we're able to take a more comprehensive approach, which you just can't do in the regular traditional medicine model.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I think has really been missing. That is, I made this argument when I first started diving into this stuff. Is like there should be well, let's back up a little bit. From a business perspective, a lot of people don't understand, and I didn't either until I really got into trying to figure out some of these issues, that everyone thinks as long as you've got MD after your name, you got a lot of money, you're making a lot of money. They have no idea the pressure that is put on a family practitioner to basically become a bureaucrat, to basically make sure all the paper gets worked, the regulatory issues, the coding, the money they have to spend just on the support infrastructure before they even get to actually seeing patients. And then by the time they're able to see patients, they're just having to, if like we were talking about, it's fee for service. So they don't have the time. They've got to see so many
Mhm.
patients. And really they're looking at hitting those mandated metrics as opposed to truly figuring out what's going on with the patient. And it always baffled me whenever I started looking at this is like, well, one, how little knowledge a lot most MDs, not like you, but just the general doctor out there has on nutrition, on how to maintain mitochondrial health, how what like they I never heard a physician until I started electing to seek these things out. Never had a doctor talk to me about body fat percentage, VO2 max, these things that I think are actually critical to longevity. Never heard about that. And you kind of look to your doctor to tell you these things. And even if they do tell you, okay, look, you've got hypertension, we're going to put you on, lipids or statins rather, or whatever. They don't have the time or the bandwidth to then coach you afterwards on, okay, it's not just about the diet and eating. So why there was never like a health coaching component bolted on. And then like what you're talking about, it's the armory. Is that correct? That's
Yeah,
where you are.
correct.
Yeah. I found out about it in your research. And I love what you guys have done. You've created an entire holistic ecosystem
Mhm.
for health and wellness. You're the physician. You've got trainers there for the physical portion. There's a nutritional, it's everything all in a one-stop shop, which I think we'll see more of. But it just shocks me how actual wellness and health portion of the human experience just doesn't exist in a doctor's office. It's not set up for that. To your point, it's just if I'm sick, if I need fixed, that's when I go. If I want to stay healthy and well, I gotta go figure that out on my own. And unfortunately, to your point, it's unless somebody else is paying for it, which I think is crazy, people will pay for insurance on their car.
Mhm.
They'll make sure they'll get their oil changed, but they think somebody else is supposed to pay for their own body and their own well-being. It's nuts.
Right. Yeah, they've been conditioned over the years, and that's gonna take a generation or 2 to, change that thinking. Now, what I'm seeing in my practice, our model, uh, so we don't take insurance, but you can use your insurance for labs and tests. Our model really, appeals to, like, the mid-30 entrepreneur,
Yep. Yep.
and they're very, very motivated, and they come in here knowing a lot, and,
Yeah.
they've done their research, and it's enjoyable for me to see them do their research, and, occasionally I learn something from them as well, but,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, Jess Cantina, she's in, Austin. She owns, Generator Athlete Lab, her and her husband, Delphin. And whenever they set it up, because it's Austin, there is a lot of entrepreneurs. There's also a lot of masters athletes, former pro athletes. And when they opened it up, she said, I really thought we would be catering to that masters athlete or that weekend warrior. And she said, but what our wheelhouse patient or client, if you will, is because she's a physical therapist by trade. She said, our wheelhouse or kind of our avatar member is an entrepreneur, a
Mhm.
high performing entrepreneur. And that's what I see. And it's a lot of you see a lot of folks. I mean, that's my background. I'm a serial entrepreneur, have been my whole life. And I look at my body as the most important business machine that I have as far as performance and mind health and understanding how to connect your cognitive health and prevention of cognitive decline with exercise and all these sorts of things. And one of the things I'm trying to do in my personal work is to bring that to a level of just the everyday American to just it's just kind of part of their normal life is that, well, again, I
Mhm.
get my oil changed, I take care of my car, I rotate my tires, I go for walks, I watch what I eat, it's just kind of that part of their day-to-day nomenclature. Now let's talk a little bit about your book. What caused you to decide to want to write the book, and what can people take, and who is that audience of one that you've written this for that should read this, and what are they going to take away from it?
Well, the book, the COVID situation really kind of tipped me into writing the book. So, depending on your views on COVID and how that was handled, you will either like the book or you probably won't like it at all. But that was the kind of last straw, if you will. And I just saw a lot of things that I don't think we were keeping patients' best interests in mind or society's best interests in mind during that time. We were only giving them half the information. And I spent a lot of time in the book talking about the Pfizer study on the vaccines and how it was somewhat misrepresented, in my opinion. And I go how research in general is misrepresented. I go over 13 strategies that they use to make their results look better than what they actually are. And it took me a while to recognize that myself, because I kind of was bamboozled, duped, and hoodwinked myself for a while. And so I just thought it was time for the general public to know. So the book really is written for anybody who has questions about the healthcare system and what they're being told by their doctor. And it's I spent a lot of time on it, and I think there's some shocking information that even doctors would find shocking. And I spend a lot of time about the pharmaceutical, medical, industrial complex, and how the pharmaceutical industry funds medical schools, medical research, medical editors, and all the way down the line, even organizations like the American Diabetic Association and American Cancer Society, and so on. And so it's a system where you're only being told enough to get you on a medication for the most part. And I'm not talking about the surgical fields when I say that.
Yeah, sure. And that's one of the things that I always try to make clear. It's not a complete throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, modern day medicine and the pharmaceuticals that have been developed to help people have been absolutely miraculous. But I don't think many people with a clear conscience could argue that we haven't done a lot of overprescribing, and that it's a shame. And by the way, so you'll appreciate this. I went in, I'm 51 years old. And so last year I went in for my first colonoscopy. Probably should have gone earlier, but I waited till I was
Yeah.
50. And I'm getting interviewed by the nurse, and she's asking me, do you take this medication, this medication? I said, no, 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 no. I said, I can make this easy. I don't take any medications. She said, oh, really? She said, well, do you ever go to the doctor? I said, yes, I go once a year for a wellness visit. And she was shocked.
Right.
And what the thing about that part of me, because I am a vain person, as much as I like to say I have no vanity, I am vain about it. I'm almost like when she's asking me about statins and these sorts of things, I'm like, how dare you ask me such a question? Like, do I look like I need to take medication? And I told her, after that, it made me think to myself, it's a shame that I am the exception and not the rule. That most people that walk through the door, they're on something.
Mhm.
They're taking something. Either it is for their mood, or whether it's just something of that nature, or for hypertension. And it's like, that's what's really tragic. And right before we got on this this podcast, I was sitting in a meeting. We've created a working group through one of the CEOs of a hospital out here in East Texas to try to help with some of the rural transformation funding that's coming out of DC into the state, to try to figure out how we can get some of this grant money into wellness programs and health and wellness. And the biggest kicker is trying to figure out how you get individuals, everyday Americans, to take control of their own health and see the value in taking that personal agency. How do you help folks, Doc, whenever you see somebody that walks through your door, they see that beautiful facility, they see you, but they just never touched this before? What are some of the things that you start to tell them to get started?
Mhm.
And then how do you, from a behavioral standpoint, work with them to make it stick so that they'll
Yeah.
actually see it through to where they truly take control of their health?
Well, the first thing I try to, and I think all of us here in this practice try to do, is find out what the patient's health goals are.
Mhm.
And so once you have that, then you can start, you have to kind of pick what you're going to start with first. Now, I would say most of our patients are pretty motivated. We do have some that don't have a clue what we do. They just came in to see a doctor for whatever reason. And going back to your point about the medications, what's not only shocking that you're the exception, not being on a medication, but a lot of patients don't know what they're on.
Yeah.
I mean, if I ask them, they're on 5 medications, they don't know the dose, they don't know the names. They're just kind of blindly, popping the pills. But we first focus on the goal, and then we try to explain, well, how lifestyle, first of all, can help them accomplish their goal. And we let them know all the resources that we have. And then depending on their budget, what what they want to spend, we'll try to tailor what we think is going to be the most cost efficient and health efficient strategy for them. So we'll put them through a battery of tests. We'll do a VO2 max, body composition, bone density study, rested metabolic rate, have them meet with the dietitian, exercise physiologist, and just kind of grind out a program for them. And then we try to see them back pretty closely, maybe within a month. If they're on hormones, we see them back roughly quarterly to 6 months, depending on how how they're feeling. But the frequent visits and phone calls helps them stay motivated.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this real quick. Go back to testosterone replacement in particular, obviously, at 51 years old, I'm interested. I'm trying to push it off as far as I can. I do believe that there will come a time whenever I start to do some replacement therapy. Now, my goal or kind of my mission at this point is to push it off. What I'm doing is I'm trying to maintain higher levels, which I have not tested in a while, but I probably need to. This is not to be crude, but you're a physician. My biggest test is my libido and my morning wood. And
Mhm.
as long as those two are pretty strong, then I'm like, okay, that's
Yeah.
my little rudimentary gauge of it. And so far, we're good. But whenever that starts to wane, whenever diet, exercise, lifting heavy objects, making sure that I've got good cardiovascular health, all those things, I probably will. My target is to try to make it to 60
Yeah.
before I start doing anything. Um, for those guys like me, and I'm asking selfishly, that are like trying to do as much naturally as possible to maintain healthy levels of testosterone production. What are some of the things just practically that anybody listening to this can do right now if they say, you know what, it's not that I'm fundamentally opposed to it. I just want to push it off as long as I can. What should they be doing right now to maintain the highest levels possible?
Well, you mentioned some of them already. Exercising regularly, particularly strength training, adequate protein in the diet. Supplements like vitamin D and fish oil can help as well. Some of those supplements that you see for erectile function and male libido, for the 40-year-old crowd, they probably do have some benefit. So that's another option. And the big thing is eating clean. So avoiding the starchy or the processed foods, the starchy carbs, focus on healthy fats, healthy proteins, um, and get really good sleep too. Sleep's been a very important part. That's when a lot of our rejuvenation, our regenerative hormones kick in. But like you said, a lot of it's just strength training. The body will respond to a stimulus and it will produce what it needs to if given the right stimulus. And that's one of the things you do with the strength training.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I took for granted for a while. Like again, I was a college athlete, so it was just kind of I didn't have to think about it for years and years and years. And then life happens, you have kids, and I continue to train, but then I went through this phase. It was about 8 years ago where and I have been exercising all these years, so I think I know what I'm doing. I didn't know crap, it turns out, because what I did was I was one of these people, and this is why I'm bringing this up now because of what you just said, that thinks as long as I'm doing a ton of cardio, I'm okay. I don't need to be bulky. I don't need to lift weights anymore. As long as I'm doing a crap ton of cardio, which I did, and I look like Matthew McConaughey from Dallas Buyers Club.
All
I did
right.
not look like good Matthew McConaughey on the beach
Yeah.
from one of his other movies. I look like the worst,
Yeah.
case scenario. My head looked too big for my body, and and then I realized I started really researching these topics and longevity, and realized, oh my god, and talked to I don't know if you ever heard of Dr. Michael Eads, who wrote the book Protein Power years ago. He's a friend. He's been on the show. We talked about it, and he said, Jason, basically, he said, right now, I would tell you to focus on resistance training. He said, cardio is important. You always want to maintain a healthy VO2 max. But, and if you look, a lot of those ultra endurance runners or
Oh,
long
yeah.
distance runners that are all skinny and emaciated, you don't see many of them living into their 90s. And but then you've got these guys that have really focused on lean body mass. And if they've taken care of themselves and haven't just shot themselves up with a bunch of, wind straw and stuff through the years, then tend to be healthier in older age. And that's really stuck with me. And I still try to do a well balanced, at least I do at least 3 resistance training sessions a
Mhm.
week. A lot of hit cardio, then some zone 2 long, steady state cardio, a lot of walking and that sort of thing. But man, I can tell you, it has changed my life. I don't look nearly as old as whenever I was just, down to 186 pounds. I'm
Okay.
6'2". I was 186 pounds and emaciated. And now I stay right around 200, lean body mass, try to maintain between 10 and 12%. I feel so much better. And I think that I went off on that tangent because I hear so often people say, no, I don't want to lift weights. I don't want to be bulky. Well, do you want to live longer and be healthy? You pretty much have to do some resistance training.
Right. And it's important for women too.
100%. And they're the ones that'll say it the most, I don't want to be bulky.
Right.
I'm like, do you know how fast, like I was talking to one of my dearest friends the other day who was telling me she said, I'm getting this flab like my mom has under my arms. I said, well, and this is a hot topic we can take off on. I'd like to hear your take on it. She's on GLP-1s, like so many are. And of course, is not lifting weights. She still drinks alcohol. She doesn't really watch her protein, which again, women, when you try to talk to them about protein, they're like, no, that's bro science. That's bro. No, you're going to be losing your muscle weight faster than I am because you're a woman. You're going to need it for stability, just like I am, and bone density as you get older. Talk a little bit about dispelling that myth and kind of the negative ramifications, especially on like if you're going to do the GLP-1s, but you're just going to completely ignore. You're just going to be excited that your appetite has been completely emaciated and crushed. What are some of the ramifications of having this attitude of, oh, I'm not eating and I love it?
Well, going back, with the strength training, I mean, you need the muscle strength because it protects your bones, and so particularly for women, they're susceptible to osteoporosis and falls and fragility, fractures, and it also helps maintain. The stronger you are, the better your balance is going to be, so you'll be able to prevent those falls. So in our practice with the GLP-1s, we don't really do it unless they're going to adhere to a strength program and meet with our dietitian.
Love it.
We have seen. And I've had people for one reason they had to stop their exercise program for whatever reason, and we've seen them actually lose more muscle mass than they have fat. But once they get back onto the strength training, they kind of regain that muscle mass again. And so one of the maybe problems with our society is everybody wants the quick fix, and so if a pill can do it or a shot can do it, unfortunately, it has replaced lifestyle.
Yep.
So, people who know what they need to do will do what we ask them to do, but there's always going to be that person who wants the shortcut, and they're going to have some problems later in life if they don't change their ways, but many of them won't. And
So do you have kind of a set of first principles whenever you're looking at someone and they come into you and they say, you know what, Doc, I've listened to the Healthy CEO. I heard your conversation with Jason Wright. I've listened to some Ben Greenfield episodes. I've listened to even Andrew Huberman and some of these guys talk about this longevity thing. And I want to start really creating a health plan for myself
Mhm.
where I proactively get off my meds. I'm leaner, I'm healthier. Do you have a set of first principles that you kind of walk that individual through to help them? Does it start with exercise? Is it nutrition? Is it cardio? Is it strength? Kind of, how do you approach getting that person ready to get on their journey?
I would place more emphasis on the diet. Okay. And then exercise too. But there's some other things. I always usually try to talk about the blue zones
Mm-hmm.
and but some of the findings there. And you have to have a strong purpose in life too. I think that's very important, and strong relationships. And we tend to overlook the importance of that on our overall health. But going back to your point, I emphasize nutrition first, exercise, and then to go. I mentioned earlier the sleep part as well. Obviously, you got to avoid the bad habits, the smoking and the drinking, and another critical factor is always be engaged in a learning activity.
Mm.
Because learning, when you're learning, you maintain a sense of curiosity, which I think stimulates critical thinking. And we know that that's one of the best ways to protect your brain from dementia is to keep learning. And it could be something physical too, or like learning a musical instrument is both physical and mental. You're reading music and you're playing. So those are some just general topics. I don't say I have like let's say a game plan, but I try to touch on those types of topics with the patients and try to see if they're deficient in one of those areas.
So let's talk about some of the things practicing what you preach. Like, what are some of your daily habits that you have found had the most impact on you?
I exercise at least 6 days a week, so it's usually 3 to 4 strength training sessions and 3 to 4 days of more or less the zone 2 training,
Yep.
occasionally some hit training. Once a month, I will do a 3-day fast. And it's not exactly a true fast. I allow myself 100 or 200 calories
Mhm.
if I, to temper the cravings. But that's worked really well, and I feel much more energetic after I do a 3-day
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
So that's something that it also helps control the weight a lot easier. I found I've been able to control my weight. I had probably was too heavy for a while there, and I'm kind of back down to where I should be. Um, I also take a sauna 3 or 4 days a week for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I think that's real helpful.
Yeah.
And occasional massage. I've had some back surgery. Like my back gets tight, my neck gets tight, so I need a massage every once in a while. And those are good ways to relax the brain too. Um, when it's sunny out, I go on my deck, I read, and I close my eyes. I get a little nap in every once in a while.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. I just had a sauna delivered yesterday. I do a cold plunge every day,
Uh,
have now for years. I love it. And look, and I tell people too, if it stresses you out, if you hate it, you despise it, you dread it so much that it causes you misery, don't do it. And I don't even do it for all the benefits like, glucose management, insulin resistance and the inflammation support. Yes, I know all that's there, but you know why I do it is because it's hard. It's something that I don't want to do. And it's the hardest thing I'll do all day. And I get it
mhm.
knocked out in the first part of the morning. And
All right.
I always tell people I never look forward to it. It's never easy, but man, it never doesn't feel amazing after I'm
Afterwards.
done. It's
Right.
so great. And then now I've incorporated sauna. I've wanted to have a
Mm.
sauna for a while. And so my wife and I just bought a sauna and I just used it for the first time last night, and
Uh,
those are the things that I think people take for granted. And that's kind of taking it to another level. I get that. But you mentioned it, just reading, learning an instrument, going for a walk in the sunshine, these things that a lot of people I think take for granted that have such a profound impact on health. It doesn't have to be a soul crushing workout.
mhm.
Um, you know, um, you mentioned you work out for 6 days a week. A lot of people they hear that and they're like, "Oh my God, I could never do that." And it's like, well, what if you for you if you're just starting out, what if one of those days you're going for a walk?
Right.
I read this incredible study that was done years ago by and what they did was the test group was a bunch of housekeepers at a hotel, and they were trying to help them with their health to get healthier. I don't know if it was for some government incentive or something for the owners or something. Probably, I don't know. But what they did was they surveyed all the housekeepers on how much exercise they were getting, and and it was all hardly any, not enough, well below what they needed. And so and then they went back, took the same group and told them the work that they were doing, how much
Yeah.
exercise was actually involved in the
Right.
work. And their biomarkers improved dramatically just by them viewing their work as exercise.
Excellent. Right.
Nothing else changed, man. They didn't start running after their shift ended or doing anything. They were still doing the same thing, but their biomarkers improved. The point being, I think a lot of people, they don't realize there's these small little hacks. I mean, it's kind of
Mhm.
where biohacking comes from. There's these small little hacks, like just your state of mind and how you view what you're doing.
Right.
It's just like food. I look at food as replenishment, nourishment,
Energy.
as fuel.
Right.
And so when I have that as the mindset, then I'm not so obsessed
Yeah.
with, is it savory? Is it wonderful? Now I love my wife and I are foodies. We love good food. But throughout the course of the week, I'm just like, just give me something that's got a high nutrition value. I'm gonna be satiated after I'm done. It hits my protein count. It's just part of like I'm a machine and it's the fuel. It's amazing what that mental
Yeah.
aspect does.
Yeah. I think I read the same article, and I think the point was that how your brain perceives what it's
Yeah.
doing is important. So
Yeah.
if you're going to mow the lawn, look at it as I'm getting exercise. Don't look
Right.
at a chore I have to do. Look at it as an exercise episode. I
Yeah.
tell people during the lockdowns, the COVID lockdowns, I said, how long is your commute? because they're working from home. Well, I had a 30-minute commute. Okay, well, you're going to use that 30 minutes of that commute time. You're going to do it. You're going to exercise.
Yeah.
And then on the same way home, you're going to take that 30 minutes coming home and you're going to exercise again or do something physical. It doesn't have to be structured
Right.
exercise. Yeah.
Right. Now, tell me about your eating protocol. Like you mentioned protein. What's kind of your formula to make sure that you get enough, you know, grams of protein per kilo? So how does that look? And do you eat 3 meals, 2 meals, or OMAD? Like, kind of what does that look like for you?
I don't count calories and I don't track calories when I exercise. Okay. So I think at some point, exercise and eating is kind of like learning a foreign language. At some
Mhm.
point, have to appreciate what that language. You can't keep translating the language back into English. You just have to appreciate it.
Yep.
You have to look at a plate of food. It says this is a healthy plate, or that was a good exercise session. So I don't track calories or that I burned or that I consume. Right now, I'm on a keto diet, and I'm kind of dealing with a recurrence of prostate cancer. And so,
What?
um, so one theory is you try to starve the cancer.
Yep.
So, so I've enjoyed it. It hasn't been all that hard to do. But today I'll just eat really one meal, and it'll be a lot of protein and fat. I'll save that for dinner. Uh, on the weekends, I get a little sloppy, and you have to be a little bit realistic.
Oh, sure.
But but I've done pure plant based. I tried different things. A plant based diet works pretty well for me. The intermittent fasting has worked well for me too. I've had patients lose weight on every program out there, and I've had patients not lose weight on every program out there.
Yeah.
I had one guy lose 90 pounds in 9 months just by going from a 12-inch plate to a 9-inch plate. He didn't even change
Right.
anything he ate.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Well, and okay, and you mentioned something too. It goes back to kind of like just your frame of mind is on fasting. It's amazing how many people they'll come to me and they'll ask about fasting. Should I fast or whatever? Which I mean, basically what the data is showing is that there is just a very strong correlation with calorie restriction and longevity. We
Mhm.
know that. How you get there, really who cares? And so what I tell people, I'm like, what you're calling fasting is just caloric restriction, and so don't be so obsessed with that. Instead, don't say you're fasting. Just try not to eat anything 3 hours before you go to bed, and and then when you wake up, try to hold off breakfast as long as you can without killing yourself, getting miserable, and biting everybody's head off. And if you get that after that starts to be normal, then maybe push it 30 minutes, and before you know it, yeah, you're probably intermittent fasting, but who cares? Really, what you're doing is just closing your feeding
Right.
window. It's just all it's whatever works for you mentally, because a lot of people, they'll say, if you say, "Oh, I'm fasting," then they're just obsessed with fasting. I'm not eating," instead of just like, "Yeah, I'm just not
Yeah.
eating anything
Yeah.
after 8 o'clock."
Yeah.
You know?
That's a good point. Or use the term time restricted eating rather than,
Yeah.
than fasting. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I have time for
think
everything.
about it too. The time restricted eating, many times you're just missing one meal.
Right. I know.
It's not that hard.
I know. It's crazy. It's like, whenever I look that's such a great point. I was telling my wife the other day, I said, life is really funny. When we're growing up, like, I look back on whenever I was a kid, my parents built a new house when I was 12. I left home to go off to college when I was 18. I said, "So that was just a short 6-year window of my 51-year life, yet it seemed so huge." It's like
Mhm.
that was my childhood. It was only 6 years. To your point, it's the exact same thing with eating. Like, essentially, if you say you're fasting or whatever, well, you're popping one of those meals out, either breakfast or maybe you just don't eat a lunch. And in the grand scheme of things, it feels like it's this huge, huge deal. But if you step back, it's really not. It's just this small little window, and it's not as bad as you think. We just get
Right.
so conditioned.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is it's a form of discipline, and if you accomplish that, you have that one little success for the
Oh,
day, and,
man,
and it
yeah.
and it carries over. Just like you with the cold plunge, you hate it, but it's an exercise in discipline, and
Yeah.
you're challenging yourself, and you're winning the battle. So then it puts you in a good frame of mind the rest of the day to tackle on more things.
100%. And the feeling of defeat if I didn't do it versus the pain, the 3 minutes of being in the ice plunge it's there's no contest. I would that defeat that I would have had by not doing it would last all day long. I'd be pissed
Yeah.
off at myself.
Yeah.
And that's wherever, and kind of like my little mental deal that I do whenever I go underwater is I always tell myself, no negotiation, no compromise. No negotiation, no compromise. I will not negotiate with myself because that is a negotiation I tend to lose.
Yeah.
And so I mentally do it. And it's like, boom, I won. I won that negotiation again. And again, to the audience listening, I'm not trying, I'm not trying to say you need to go do a cold plunge or whatever, but that's just kind of my thing. It's like that self challenge to build that discipline. And yeah, and once you get it, then you don't want that streak to break, or you don't want to let yourself down. And it makes the rest of the day and all these other little mini
Mhm.
battles so much easier.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, well, Doc, this has been great. Nick, what else can before I let you go, give this audience some good takeaways that may hear this from a physician standpoint, and they are wanting to truly crack the code on, by the way, longevity, as you know, and regenerative medicine. They become kind of buzzwords that people don't really understand. Longevity, we're good in the US about helping people live a long time, be alive a long time,
Mhm.
not necessarily live a long time, but be alive a
Right.
long time. So longevity, I think, does have a more specific mission. So before I let you go, give this audience kind of a final thesis on your work and what they should be doing.
Well, you want to focus on the health span. So you want to live a high quality life and then, you know, die. You don't want to die slowly. Um, and one reason you want to focus on keeping yourself healthy and optimally healthy and fit as long as possible is it gives you more opportunity to have an impact on your family, the people around you. I mean, especially if you love what you do and you enjoy people, you naturally want to hang around longer and be able to influence the lives of other people. And so I think sometimes you have to think outside yourself and have a motivation that goes beyond you to remain disciplined in your health habits. I would say, focus on the basics. They're so basic, you forget about them, but that's exercise, nutrition, sleep. The other thing is stress management. Um, do your own research in particular. I think if you rely on the nightly news for your medical information, you're going to be misled. I would not be afraid to challenge your physician on something if you don't agree with something they're telling you, or you feel like you're being coerced into a treatment that you don't fully agree with. I mean, you need to do it in a polite way, and there's ways to do that. And you just might want to throw some suggestions out. Well, what about, instead of a statin, what about, red rice yeast or, some other supplement or something like that. So you need to take charge of your own life. You're the only one that really ultimately cares about yourself. And, life is meant to be lived. So live it to its fullest, have a strong sense of purpose and
I
keep
love
on
it.
keeping on.
I love it. What one quick question I should have asked earlier with regard to, because and you mentioned statins, it makes me think about like blood work. With regard to proactively getting some analysis and data, how do people go about that? What would you should suggest? Where do they go get a blood panel and someone that like you that can read it versus someone that's not used to
Yeah.
getting into the detail? How do they go about doing that?
Well, a lot of people don't know that you can order a lot of your own lab work. And there's places that you can do that, and there's places online that do a lot of functional medicine testing. Uh, One of the things we didn't talk about that is really important is gut health.
Mhm.
And there are tests out there that you can check the microbes in your intestinal tract and see if you have an imbalance or if you're lacking one. Um, but I would just research functional medicine testing online, and you want to go beyond just the basic blood count, metabolic panel, and thyroid or PSA level, cholesterol, and hemoglobin A1C. Those are just the bare minimum that you should have done. So you need to have a lot more done, and some of them you can, like I said, you can order them yourselves. And some of these labs will have a doctor contact you and go over the results if you need help interpreting them. But even then, you can find the interpretation online too, with particularly with AI and ChatGPT and all that stuff now.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. My little brother keeps sending me all this data that he's finding on himself. Well, he went and got his blood work done, had ChatGPT analyze it for him, gave all the biomarkers he'd been tracking, and it's pretty amazing the data we have at our
Yeah.
fingertips.
The other thing I would caution, though, if you get enough tests, you're going to have an abnormal result somewhere.
Yeah,
So don't get too, excited or don't get too concerned about that necessarily. It may not mean anything. So that's where you might need the help of a physician to kind of coach you through that.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Now, where do people keep up with you? Where can they get your book?
Well, the book is at, you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. And so I don't know, I got a little copy right here.
Perfect.
And I have a website called JackoMD180.com. And so website's been around for about 13, 14 years. I have over 1,100 articles on them. I'm having a hard time coming up with new topics. So if you have any, I'd be happy to write on some of those topics as well.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific.
And then over here, my email, if you want to contact me at the practice, it's jjacko at We Are the Armory. So at We Are the Armory, all one word.com.
Fantastic. I'll make sure that's included in the show notes.
Yeah.
And Dr. Joe Jacko, man, this has been great. I'm so glad to have met you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it, Jason. Take care.
The content provided in this podcast, The Healthy CEO, is for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The opinions expressed by our hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Healthy CEO. Any information provided by our hosts or guests, including any physicians who may appear on the podcast, is solely for informational purposes and does not create any doctor-patient relationship. Listeners are advised to consult with their healthcare providers before making any changes to their health routines. The Healthy CEO and its affiliates assume no responsibility or liability for any consequence resulting directly or indirectly from any action or inaction you take based on the information provided in this podcast.